Today I'm going to share with you some tips that'll help you to approach challenges more effectively. Because we all face challenges every day. And when we learn how to approach them with the most effective mindsets, we begin to use them to reach new levels of being, new levels of performance and fulfillment and happiness and joy. They become an asset to us, but we have to understand how to approach them effectively. So let's talk about that. The first tip that I have for you is to accept the reality of the challenge that you're facing. And instead of focusing on something else that you wish was happening, accept that you're facing this challenge. There's a bumper sticker that we often see that says, "I'd rather be blank. I'd rather be golfing. I'd rather be surfing. I'd rather be camping," whatever it is. If we bring that mindset into our challenges, right when we face a challenge, if we focus on, "I'd rather be doing something else," and we focus on that thing that we'd rather be doing than facing this challenge, we will not be able to bring our best self to that challenge. And ultimately, when we think about the other possibilities that we could be spending our time on, what it would be like if I wasn't facing this challenge right now, how relaxing it would be and stress-free it would be and comfortable it would be. When we're focused on that, it doesn't help us progress and handle the situation in any positive way. And it really increases our suffering because it makes us feel very avoidant and resistant to the hardship that we're experiencing. So instead, we need to lean in and face our challenges head on and ask ourselves, how can I approach this challenge as my best self? How can I bring my best self to this situation? Viktor Frankl, who's the author of A Man's Search for Meaning, shares a quote when he was reflecting on his time in the Nazi concentration camps. And this quote really impacted me. He says, "We had to learn that it did not really matter what we expected from life, but rather what life expected from us." So he goes on to explain that they had to come to the realization that everything that they were experiencing there in the concentration camps, even though it was absolutely horrible and agonizing, it was their reality, and they didn't have power, at least in that moment, to change that reality. And hanging on to alternate realities and thinking about how horrible this is and how much they wished their reality was different wasn't helping them, and it was just making things worse. But when they really faced the challenge head on, they were able to cope with it in the most effective ways. And the prisoners who were able to do that were more likely to survive and were more likely to experience some positive growth even after experiencing such horrible things as starvation and abuse and dehumanization and freezing and illness. They were able to actually grow in positive ways from it. So I really admire Viktor Frankl's approach, and I can't imagine the level of agony that he and the other prisoners went through. But I admire that he and so many others were able to just lean in and accept what their reality was, and then focus on what they could control in responding to that adversity and making the most of it. Tip number 2 is to find purpose in challenges. There is always purpose in every challenge that we face, no matter how big or how tiny it is. There's always purpose. When we lose sight of purpose in challenges, when they feel meaningless to us, they become so frustrating. They just feel like frustrating inconveniences. But when we can recognize the purpose in challenges, we find peace within them, even though they don't get any easier, they're still difficult. We find peace because we recognize that it's working for our good and the good of others. It's giving us some benefit. So what is the benefit that comes from struggles and challenges? The biggest benefit is personal growth. We become better versions of ourselves and happier versions of ourselves when we experience challenges. And that can always happen. No matter what challenges we face and no matter what mindset we have, we can experience growth. But the most growth happens when we approach it with an intentional mindset to grow from it. When we approach it with a negative mindset or a vindictive mindset, we can digress and we can make backwards progress, right? And we can become worse than we were. So that can happen too. So we have to make sure that we're intentional about growing. And when we approach challenges with that mindset, we really can improve and become more than we currently are. And that makes them feel meaningful, which really helps us. Another way that we can find challenge or purpose in challenges is to think about how they're helping us to develop empathy for others who are experiencing similar challenges. Every challenge that we go through helps us to gain experience that can help us to understand people more fully. And so we can share empathy more fully when we gain experience through challenges. And finally, another way to find purpose in challenges is to ask ourselves, how can I use this challenge and my response to this challenge to inspire others who are facing challenges too? And by the way, that others is everybody in the whole world, right? Because we all face challenges all the time. So how can I inspire others to handle their challenges through the way that I handle mine? The next tip is to focus on gratitude. It's really easy when we're facing something difficult or inconvenient or frustrating or sad or depressing to lose sight of the positive things in our lives. And when we do that, that narrows our vision and keeps us stuck and kind of paralyzed in negativity. It's important to validate our struggles and to let ourselves experience them as difficult. They're not pleasant. But it's also important to remember, to actively remember the good things that we have in our lives, the pleasant things, the nice things. And it's also important to see our challenges themselves as good things that are ultimately helping us, even though they're difficult. We have to learn to train our brains to count our blessings, even when we're going through something really difficult. I experienced an interesting time as a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I served a mission in South Texas, and most of the places I served in were right along the border of Mexico, right along the Rio Grande. And one day, my mission companion and I were walking down the street, and we saw a man who was wet and had blood on his head, and it was dripping down his face. And we were so worried. We went up to him and asked him what was wrong, what was happening. And he told us that just 30 minutes earlier, he had been on the Mexico side of the border, and he and his cousins got picked up by a drug cartel, and they were beaten to death. They thought he was dead, but he actually wasn't dead. So they were beaten to death and thrown in the Rio Grande. And his cousins all really did die. He lost his cousins. But he miraculously survived and came to consciousness and came over to the US side. And now here we were. He was beaten. He was soaking wet. He was bloody. He was seriously injured. And so we started trying to get him taken care of. And we didn't have a vehicle at the time, so we started walking with him to a store to get him some clothes and food and then go from there. And as we were walking, he started telling us about how blessed he was in his life. He started talking about how wonderful his wife is, and how wonderful his children are, and how wonderful it is to be able to work every day, and how wonderful his town is that he lives in, and how wonderful the people are. And as he was telling us these things, it blew my mind. It impacted me in a way that I will never forget, because this man had literally just been beaten almost to death, to a degree that the people beating him up thought he was dead. He was beaten so badly. And the first thing that he was talking about was how blessed he was in his life. And that just taught me a profound lesson, that no matter how bad things are, no matter how painful something is that we're going through, we can always find joy in our blessings in life. So when you're facing a challenge, don't lose sight of the wonderful, amazing blessings that we so often take for granted. As you keep your sight on those things and practice active gratitude, you'll be able to have so much more joy even in the midst of your struggles. And then one more tip I'd like to give to you is, when appropriate, ask yourself, how can I bring fun into my approach to this challenge? This isn't appropriate for every challenge. Some challenges are just really serious and we kind of need to handle them in a serious way. But a lot of the challenges that we face on a daily basis could benefit from us approaching them in a more lighthearted, fun way. So ask yourself, how can I incorporate fun into my approach to this challenge? That helps us to stop seeing it so much as a threat and start seeing it as an exciting, challenging opportunity. We actually enjoy challenges. We like to be pushed and we like to grow. It may not always feel like that, but it truly is so satisfying and even can be very enjoyable. That's why, for example, people choose to do things like marathons or mud runs and sports and challenging things. People choose willingly to do challenging things because it truly is fun and satisfying. So ask yourself that, how you can incorporate fun, and you'll be able to be more lighthearted in your approach to the challenge. Thank you so much for listening today. I truly appreciate it. Please make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube and share this podcast with 3 friends so that they can benefit from it too. Thank you so much, and let's go be high performing today.